So recently I've been moving over from Imperial to metric. Seems to be the way to go. Most of the world does it. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I took a rough-sawn piece of lumber and I made it into a shallow table that I needed in a hallway. Perfect for a place to put things when you've got your hands full, a need to place your keys somewhere. It's a project using 22.5-degree angles, dominoes, and glue. No nails. Show you how I did it. Come on. Well, this project starts out with some rough-sawn lumber, and because my jointer is only 8 inches wide, I had to rip it down so I could plane the first piece. Trying to get a good, clean side on it. Then I moved to the edge, so I have co-planing sides. Then onto the planer to get it down to the right thickness. I'm shooting for a finished size of about 1.25 inches, give or take. Kind of winging it. This is my original SketchUp drawing, which again is done all in metric. It's the first time I've ever designed anything with all metric measurements. So I cut a test piece first, just to make sure the angle was right. Now I'm cutting the actual first leg. And it's a good chance to make sure everything is placed correctly before I go to the dominoes. I'm just trying to get the marks lined up so I can get the dominoes cut for the legs to join to the top. Time to break out the domino. Kind of new to this tool, so I'm still getting used to how to use it. Now, you don't obviously need a Festool domino to do this kind of work, but it is something I afforded myself early on, so I'm trying to get better with it. It makes great joinery. It's very accurate, but again, you have to be a good driver for you to get the best results. It's always good to dry fit the dominoes just to make sure that things are correct and it's not too tight. So now I'm just going to set it to be able to put the dominoes in the face of the board. And again, dry fitting the dominoes on the other leg. It's a nice advantage to be able to set the mortise wider on one side and tight on the other to give you some flexibility to get the piece lined up front or back. It allows you a little bit of play. And once I'm happy with the dry fit, it's on to cutting the center support. So it's back to a 90 degree with the blade on the table saw. Now, since the legs weren't glued yet and things still had play, I decided to just lay a piece over the top of the 2 legs roughly in place and mark my cuts for the 22.5-degree angles. That way I still had a little bit of fudge room. That's a technical term. Break out the Incra 5000 miter sled. It's a nice piece of equipment. Again, not absolutely necessary, but it does make life nice when you're trying to do repeatable angles. So I set it to a 22.5 degree. Lock things down. Do make sure your fence is clear of the blade. As you can see, I learned the hard way. Now I'm just cutting the 2 sides of the center stretcher. Test fit. Again, remember, these are not glued yet. Now, to be able to clamp these, I had to come up with a way to use parallel clamps on an angled piece. So I got the idea to cut some pieces of wood, 22.5 degrees, double-sided tape, affix them to the edges or the pieces of the wood that I needed to clamp straight. And to my surprise, it seemed to work pretty well. Now, one more dry fit with the clamps in place to make sure everything balances correctly, make sure it supports itself before I use the first drop of glue. This is important. Now, this is just an idea I had to give myself a little bit better placement for these pieces. Once the dominoes were cut, it gave me a outside and inside marking, and I just transferred those markings around to the edges. I wanted to make sure that I had references from all sides. I'm a big proponent of triple checking things before you go to glue or screws or fasteners or anything. It's a lot less headache if you can figure it out before then. Couple hold downs, get the two pieces in that orientation so that you can line up the domino to be able to get both sets of cuts. This is something I actually picked up from Sedge Tool. I'll link to the video below in the description, but it's a great technique to be able to do both cuts without moving the piece. You just line up the marks for the vertical part. This is the first time I've tried this technique, so I did have to adjust the mortise a little bit and waller one of them out to get things to line up. But you know what? Hey, I'm learning. It's always a work in progress. It is very beneficial to have the ability to widen one of the two mortise because it gives you some flexibility to adjust your pieces so you can get them in the right spot. The more you do this, I think the better you get at it, but I am still pretty new at it, so it's a good lesson in how to use these. Just trying to get it all dry fit to make sure that things will go together, because once you glue this, you do not have any second chances. So now's the time to make your adjustments. And there we have a dry fit table. So now it's onto some sanding, because it is so much easier to do it while the pieces are apart than once they're together. So I tried to go through and put all my finishes and edges. And I learned on the first go around that the double-sided tape didn't hold as well as I had hoped. So I did this trick where you use painter's tape on both sides and CA glue and activator, and you can still take it off and it doesn't damage the wood. Now it's time for the final glue up. Get my dominoes in place. The tape is to cut down on the squeeze out, because it's a lot harder to get the glue cleaned up in a tight 90-degree corner like that. So a trick I picked up from some other YouTubers is putting some painter's tape, and it makes it a little bit easier on the cleanup. Some glue on the top, ready for that. Now this ended up going in a little bit tougher. I don't think I had my dominoes quite lined up, so this didn't go together as easily as I would have liked it to, but the parallel clamps brought it together. And I also made a slight miscalculation, if you can see daylight through where the stretcher meets the top. I wanted to get it down off the table, and I had no idea it was going to be as heavy as it is once it was all together with the clamps and the wood. That was a backbreaker. Time for some finish edge sanding. Get my corners nice and soft. Going to 220 grit here. I recently picked up this padded sander, and it really makes it nice to get detailed edges without overdoing it like you tend to do with an orbital sander. It's a little more finesse. This bush oil I also picked up at a wood show recently. I'm really a fan of this. It has a wonderful characteristic. It goes on nicely. It has a great color finish. It's a natural finish, but it brings out the natural color of the wood. It really shows the grain well. I really like this stuff a lot. Jason with Bourbon Moth Woodworking has a great video on the importance of making sure your rags are dry before you throw them in the trash. I'll link to it in the description below. And there we have it. Glued up, finished up, and in its new home, in my hallway, and my wife couldn't be happier. Hope you enjoyed it. See you on the next video.